I want you to think about your joints for a moment. Not in an abstract way, I mean right now, today. The stiffness when you first stand up in the morning. The way certain movements that used to be effortless now come with a small, quiet negotiation with your own body. For so many people over 60, this has simply become normal. Something you live with, something you stop mentioning because everyone around you seems to have their own version of it too. But here's something I want you to sit with. What if a part of that stiffness, that background discomfort, wasn't simply an unavoidable consequence of time passing, but was connected to something happening at a cellular level that research has actually identified, and that certain everyday ingredients have been shown, in real studies, to help influence? I'm not going to tell you that any drink can stop inflammation entirely. Your body needs some inflammation, it's part of how you heal. And I'm not going to tell you that anything can repair you in some sweeping, magical sense. But what I am going to share with you today is real, it's backed by genuine research. And I think once you understand the mechanism, you'll see your morning routine a little differently. Stay with me. My name is Dr. James Carter, and for over 3 decades I've worked in integrative medicine, and if there's one word that comes up more than almost any other in conversations with patients over 60, it's inflammation. Sometimes it's a word their doctor has used. Sometimes it's a word they've heard on the news. And often it's a word that feels vague and overwhelming. Something happening inside them that they can't see, can't quite understand, and don't know what, if anything, they can do about. So today, I want to walk through this carefully. What inflammation actually is, why it changes as we age, and what the research genuinely shows about one particular drink that has been studied more extensively than almost any other in this context. Let's start with the basics because I think this is where so much confusion happens. Inflammation, at its core, is not the enemy. Acute inflammation, the kind that happens when you twist your ankle or fight off a cold. Is your immune system doing exactly what it's supposed to do? The issue that researchers have become increasingly focused on over the past 2 decades is something different. Chronic, low-grade inflammation, sometimes referred to in research as inflammaging. A term that reflects how this kind of background inflammatory activity tends to increase with age, even in the absence of any specific injury or infection. Research published in journals including Nature Reviews, Immunology and The Lancet has linked this kind of chronic low-grade inflammation to a wide range of age-related changes, including joint discomfort, changes in energy levels, and cardiovascular health markers. One of the key players in this process is a signaling molecule called NFKB, which we've discussed in other contexts. It's essentially a switch that, when chronically activated, increases the production of inflammatory compounds throughout the body. And here's where the drink we're talking about today comes in: turmeric, specifically prepared as a warm drink, sometimes called golden milk, combined with black pepper and a fat source like milk or a plant-based alternative. I know turmeric might sound familiar to some of you, it's become a popular ingredient in recent years. But I want to walk through the actual mechanism, because I think the turmeric is good for inflammation message has become so common that people have stopped understanding why. And understanding why is what makes this information actually useful. The active compound in turmeric, most studied in this context, is curcumin. Research published in journals including the Journal of Medicinal Food and Oncogene has found that curcumin can help modulate NFKB activity, not shutting it down entirely, which would be neither possible nor desirable, but helping to bring chronically elevated activity back toward a more balanced range. A meta-analysis published in journals including phytotherapy research, which combined results from multiple clinical trials, found that curcumin supplementation was associated with reductions in certain inflammatory markers, including C-reactive protein, in several of the studies analysed. But here's the detail that I think almost nobody explains properly, and it's the reason so many people try turmeric, don't notice much difference, and give up. Curcumin, on its own, is very poorly absorbed by your body. Research has found that a large percentage of the curcumin you consume passes through your digestive system largely unabsorbed. This is where the synergy combination becomes essential, not optional. Black pepper contains a compound called piperine, and research published in the journal Planta Medica found that combining curcumin with piperine increased curcumin's bioavailability by a significant margin in the study participants. Some research has cited increases in the range of up to 20-fold, though I want to be careful here because the exact figure has varied across different studies and depends on dosage and preparation. The practical takeaway is consistent across the research. Without black pepper or a similar approach to improving absorption, much of the potential benefit of curcumin may simply not be available to your body at all. I want to tell you about a man I'll call Robert. Robert is 71 years old, a retired mechanic, and when Robert first came to see me, he described his hands as not working like they used to. Stiffness in his fingers that made small tasks, like buttoning a shirt or opening jars, increasingly frustrating. His doctor had noted some markers consistent with general age-related joint changes, and Robert had already tried turmeric on his own, based on something he'd read online, but told me I didn't really notice anything, so I stopped. When we talked through his preparation, it became clear that Robert had been adding turmeric to smoothies, without any black pepper and without any fat source, which research suggests may also play a role in curcumin absorption, since curcumin is fat-soluble. We adjusted his approach. A warm drink in the evening, combining turmeric, a pinch of black pepper, and milk alongside his existing routine and his doctor's ongoing monitoring. Robert told me that after about 6 weeks he noticed his hands felt less locked up in the mornings. Not pain-free, he was careful to say, but noticeably less stiff. He said, "I'm not sure if it's the turmeric or just paying more attention to my body, but either way I'll take it." Robert's honesty here matters to me. He didn't claim a miracle, and that kind of grounded, realistic feedback is, in my experience, often the most trustworthy. The second synergy combination involves ginger, and this is where the drink really starts to come together, as more than just turmeric alone. Ginger contains compounds called gingerols, and research published in journals including the Journal of Nutritional Biochemistry has found that gingerols may work through some overlapping but also some distinct anti-inflammatory pathways compared to curcumin, including some research suggesting effects on a different inflammatory signaling molecule called COX2. Some researchers have described the combination of turmeric and ginger as potentially having complementary effects, addressing inflammation through more than one pathway simultaneously, though I want to be clear that direct head-to-head research on the combination specifically, as opposed to each ingredient separately, is still a developing area. Before we continue, I want to take a moment to connect with you directly. If you're watching this video, scroll down and tell me your age and what's been the biggest struggle for you when it comes to stiffness, joint discomfort, or just feeling like your body is working against you some days. I read every single comment, and they help me understand what matters most to the people watching. And if this video has given you something valuable so far, please take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already, because the next piece of this puzzle is something that I think almost nobody connects to this drink, and once you understand it, I believe it could be the difference between a drink that does very little and one that's actually working the way the research suggests it can. Stay with me. I want to tell you about a woman I'll call Margaret. And yes, I know this name has come up before in another context, but this is a different Margaret, a 75-year-old retired hairdresser. Margaret's story involves something a little different. She'd been dealing with general fatigue and what she described as puffiness, particularly in her hands and feet, that her doctor had noted was likely related to mild, age-related changes in circulation and fluid retention after appropriate evaluation had ruled out anything more serious. Margaret incorporated a turmeric and ginger drink prepared with black pepper and milk into her evening routine alongside her existing care. She told me that after about 2 months, she noticed the puffiness in her hands seemed less pronounced in the mornings, and her energy felt slightly more even throughout the day. She said, "I used to feel like my body was holding on to something it didn't need to hold on to. I still notice it sometimes, but not as often." Margaret's story is a good reminder that these changes are often gradual and relative. Less often, rather than never, but for someone living with that sensation daily, less often can mean a great deal. And now the secret I promised you, the piece of this entire conversation that I genuinely believe is the most overlooked. It's not an additional ingredient. It's about the form of turmeric itself. Specifically, the difference between standard ground turmeric and a less common preparation called turmeric with enhanced curcuminoid content, sometimes labelled on products as having a standardized curcumin percentage. Here's why this matters so much. Standard ground turmeric, the kind most commonly found in the spice aisles, typically contains only a small percentage of curcumin, by weight, often somewhere in the range of 2 to 5%. This means that even with black pepper and fat to improve absorption, you're starting with a relatively small amount of the actual compound that the research has focused on. Some products are specifically processed to concentrate the curcuminoid content to a much higher percentage, and while I want to be careful not to recommend any specific brand or product, the research studies that found the more notable effects on inflammatory markers generally used concentrated curcumin extracts rather than standard culinary turmeric powder alone. This doesn't mean standard turmeric has no value. It absolutely can contribute as part of an overall pattern. But if you've been using a pinch of turmeric from your spice rack and wondering why you haven't noticed much, this difference in concentration may be a significant part of the explanation, and it's something I rarely hear discussed clearly. I want to share one final story before we close. I want to tell you about a man I'll call Vincent, and again, a different Vincent from any previous story. Vincent is 77 years old, a retired truck driver, and Vincent's story involves something that I think captures the emotional heart of everything we're discussing today. Vincent had been living with knee discomfort for years, related to long-term wear from decades of physical work, and he'd reached a point where he'd largely stopped his evening walks, something he used to genuinely enjoy, walking around his neighbourhood as the sun went down. He told me I didn't decide to stop, I just kind of drifted away from it because it started hurting more than it was worth. Alongside his continued care with his doctor, including the physical therapy his doctor had recommended, Vincent incorporated a turmeric and ginger drink with black pepper into his routine. He was careful to tell me he didn't expect it to fix his knee. He understood that wasn't realistic. But several months later, Vincent told me something that stayed with me. He said, "I started walking again. Not because the pain disappeared, it didn't, but it got to a point where the walk felt worth it again, instead of not worth it. And once I started again, I remembered how much I missed it." Vincent's story isn't about a dramatic before and after. It's about a small shift that was enough to tip the balance back toward something he loved doing. And that, to me, is what meaningful change often actually looks like. As we come to the end of this video, I want to leave you with something important. So much of what we're told about aging frames our bodies as simply running down, with nothing to be done except manage the decline. But the research on chronic low-grade inflammation tells a more nuanced story, one where small, consistent, evidence-based choices can genuinely influence how your body feels, day to day, even if the change isn't dramatic, even if it's not a cure, even if it's simply the difference between a walk that feels worth it and one that doesn't. You're not too old for your body to respond to care. You haven't missed your window. Every evening offers another small opportunity. A warm drink, a few minutes of intention, a small act of taking care of yourself. And these small things over time are not nothing. They add up to something real. If this video gave you something valuable today, please subscribe and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Leave a comment below with your age and what's been on your mind. I read every single one, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care of yourselves. You deserve to feel good in your own body every single day.